His favorite pastime, but what a lot of people don't know about this sport is the role that it played in American military history. Carey Keefe grew up knowing her grandfather was an all-star football player at the University of Alabama.
My grandfather is the handsome one on the left. Frank Mosley's in the middle, and Paul Bryant with the long, dark coat.
But it wasn't until her godfather's funeral that a military story was unearthed.
These men had a lot of grit. They were tough. So there was no sense of, look what I did and what I accomplished. They never talked about it.
Dr. Timothy Orr teaches history at Old Dominion University. He says the attack on Pearl Harbor was a call to action.
A great many Americans started volunteering in unheard of numbers because the surprise attack and kind of the great amount of anger and resentment that the Americans had towards the Japanese at the time.
But there was a problem. The Navy didn't think hundreds of these cadets were ready for combat.
They were soft physically and mentally, and they were not prepared for a wartime experience.
Which is why the Navy created the V-5 pre-flight training program using sports like football to train the next generation of aviators. Keefe tells this story and her grandfather's role in her book called Tide of Dreams.
It's a story about the closest collaborating partnership in the history of college football.
Across the nation, the Navy called on coaches and athletes, and 20,000 people applied for this program.
Football had all the components, skills like it would quicken reaction time, concentration under pressure.
American air missions in World War II kind of require squadrons or groups to kind of go in together and then work in a kind of a synchronized aerial ballet. And so sports on the ground kind of teach those kinds of skills.
800 coaches were selected, including Paul, Frank, and Carney, all three.
Together, they spent 30 days at the Naval Academy and were inducted as officers, then sent to get these men in shape.
Because the cadets' life depended on it, their fellow soldiers' life depended on it. So the Navy and the country were depending on these coaches.
For 11 years, Keefe collected data and diaries about this program. These coaches and the cadets who put aside their dreams for their country. A brave chapter, now bookmarked in history by Carey Keefe. In Suffolk, Danielle Saitta, News 3.